Hello, I'm so happy you're here. In my setting, the current year is 557 Age Betrayal, because it was 557 years ago that the Edict of Saints was written, when men turned on their masters and ate them to gain their strength. In the lands of plenty, each year is 4 seasons, each season 10 weeks, and every week 10 days. And after so much time, the present has become defined by far more than the betrayal for which its age was named. In the north, a genocide has ended, leaving a colossal power vacuum in its wake. In the west, a new military superpower is fighting to be born, while just across the border, the largest army ever seen is gradually dismantling itself, struggling through a transition to peace after decades of conquest. All of this because 10 years ago, the banished prince, Bernard Almson XIV, walked into the capital which bears his family name, and without shedding a single drop of blood, ended the bloodiest reign in human history, that of his uncle, the Pontiff and Praetor. His uncle's rule went unchallenged for 80 years, but fell in a single hour. Summoning an eclipse, Bernard released both pontiff and world from their shackles. The new king's first order was to free all vassals and end all wars. And in the decades since his rule began, he has worked to atone for the atrocities which his uncle was forced to commit. Commissioned on the very day he wrested power, the book we will be reading from today is the first to explain this new world. A world of reconstruction that came when Brainard's moon swallowed the Praetor's great dawn. Realms of the Common Era by Madison Haskell, Chapter 1, Death of the Author. This is my first account, and it is too first-hand, for today I have seen history in its flesh and been made a true historian. This morning I witnessed the sky grow dark as Prince Bernard walked into the capital and without opposition declared himself mortal king of his empire. It seems as if he were everywhere all at once, for I know not how he could make time on such a momentous day to speak with me. But he came to the academy nonetheless, not to see our faces, but perceive our souls. I have served my mentor, the scholar Nilarius Lefray, for 3 years, but between him and his colleagues are lifetimes of study. However, Bernard told my masters that their service had been a crime, but one for which they had been granted pardon, and at a glance they were dismissed, as Bernard turned his gaze to me. My king asked many questions, my name, my title, my age, and then asked me why he had removed those men and given me their place. Shocked, I immediately spoke of my inexperience, my ignorance. I was just an apprentice, the daughter of a dairy farmer and a seamstress, that as a child we had no books, and so I started work as a bookbinder to be closer to the written word. That I did all my duties and chores at the dead of night because my family could not afford the candles for me to read past dark. That even the lowly position I was given was not earned. That I wrote relentlessly to anyone of education to let me work, and that only luck had placed me before him. But my king could see my heart, and kindly interrupted. He told me that all these things that I had said were qualifications, that it was not by chance, but passion, that I found myself at his feet, and why it is that I remained to carry on the great work while my betters were relieved. He took the time to enlighten me, showed me that the college had been lying to itself, and worse, to its progeny, professing greatness while spreading cruelty. For my masters did not study history, but sculpt it, revise it, bend and omit truths, for they were but victors writing their own stories. Bernard declared that new books must be written by new hands, and that the records of this academy must be rebuilt, so we might study the past free from its own influences. Humbled and aware of the great weight placed upon my shoulders, here begin the new volumes, and the first of many deaths by the author Madison Haskell. Yesterday, the Almsonian Empire was synonymous with the world, but today 6 realms are recognized, their borders drawn roughly by culture and geography. These are Almson, Immes, and Kopania, centralized across their enormity through tremendous administrative effort, and the territories of Duskfall, Khrelma, and the eastern coastal region. All told, the lands of plenty far outmatch and outstretch mankind. We number perhaps 100 million souls, but are spread across nearly 20 million miles squared. As such, most of the world remains unsettled. A place of unsolvable problems, the brutal elements and mystic dangers work to erode the networks of trade and communication necessary for large-scale governance. Nowhere is this more true than in the deserts of Khrelma, the tundras of Duskfall, and the jungles of the eastern coastal region. And while pockets of sophistication such as the ancient city of Paleonuva have always existed, even the fertile lands of Oftmarch better support small and divided kingdoms rather than societies of size and means. However, settlements all across the lands of plenty are being founded at record pace. Though terrible deeds were done to spread Almsonian culture, the adoption of our practices where peaceful have served to lessen the scarcities of food and safety. The explosion of the method has made new places viable, and with diversified labor, old towns are lifted beyond the traditional agrarian state. To our best census, the population still considered Almsonian numbers 40 million, with 1 million in the city of Streel alone and nearly as many found in its capital. After 2 decades recovering from our war, the Immes Commonwealth boasts 20 million, yet this number is expected to fall as recent instability and famine will push ever more to emigrate. Kopania, comprising the world's largest islands and greatest concentration of raw metals, though ever strategically defensible, holds no more than 5 million people. Despite their population nearly doubling in the past 40 years, thanks in part to the ports and trade which came with Almsonian integration. Finally, it is believed that 10 million people live within both the wastes of Khrelma and the wilds of the ECR, with twice as many spread across the vastness of Duskfall. And with sizes understood, we turn to what makes each territory unique. Almson is the only empire, and an empire it remains. Of kings united, there is only one rule, one story under which their kind can kneel, and its glory could only have come from the twins. Descended from a lion and wolf, it was they who ushered in the age before, who ended the apocalypse, who ventured to the unknowable place where death resides and struck despair with mortal blow. They were the truest of kings and queens, but their presence which inspired men frightened the very heavens, for they led kings as kings lead nations, and forged the greatest host that fate shall see. They were made and meant to kill despair, but they had done it, and that meant they could threaten gods. And so, with purpose fulfilled, Celestials plotted against them for the crime of their victory. But both were wise and knew many things. Rather than face their fate and allow their order to die with them, they sacrificed their identity for immortality. For the only thing in all reality which the Celestials cannot destroy are themselves. So it was that they took the names Solaric and Lunara, and relinquished their personhood, absconding with the sun and moon. But they did as none else have done, for so great were they in will that their souls were set apart. Unparalleled in their understandings of the philosophies inherent, they were not subsumed by celestial consciousness, but became a part of it, a piece that loved man, the conscience of the sun and moon. Linked with such divine power, they protect their people still, but as one with the heavens, their wants contend with the weight of omniscience. So strong, so beyond us, we grow hard to see, and thus they could no longer lead. In the last moments as themselves they made final decree, and formed our systems of church and state. Knowing the jealousy of their fellow kings, they deemed them incapable of empire, and rested control in the hands of humans ever loyal. As overseer, Lunara chose the wisest of their advisors, a woman with the powers of prescience, and named her Pontiff to build a clergy and listen for guidance in the sun and moon. And Solaric chose the greatest of his generals, a man gifted in guile, to name as Praetor. This was the first Almson, and this his bond, to act always in accordance with the wishes of the twins, and lead their people in their stead. In return, he was made the wolves howl and lions roar, speaking with their voice when their signs fell silent. This is how he and all his family became as kings, speaking to them as equals, and adjudicating between all the rulers of empire. To this day our structure stands, 7 centuries of pontiffs and praetors unbroken, as clerics commune and Almsons act. This great heritage is what makes us more. Bearing direct authority of Solaric and Lunara, we alone make vassals of skyborn kings. Each a bannered lord, all kingdoms benefit from the other's talents, standing together in war and coming together in peace. This collaboration is the cornerstone of our strength, and yet it has led to our greatest shame. For in conquest to unite all things, horrible deeds were done. In the past century we have known but one emperor, a man given no name at birth, but whom rose to hold both titles of pontiff and praetor. From the moment he could speak, he spoke with Solaric's messengers, and when voices came to him justly we thrived. For a lifetime he was omnipotent among men, unparalleled in the arts arcane and incarn, rising from death, leading his nation to invention, and conquering the world. But all his miracles were granted for gain, for Bernard has shown these angels false, and that the splendor of war was sin, that the praetor, blameless in his crimes, was chosen not by Solaric, but by the sun, compelled to fight not for his glory, but her need to destroy. Acts now renounced are atoned for by the banished prince. A world made right, as Bernard conjured his eclipse and cut from the pontiff all words of the sun, ending his madness, ceasing the bloodshed, and freeing all nations once taken. Immes is a land of highlands and swamps, and incredibly fertile fields wherever the two do meet. Thought to date over a millennia in age, it is by far the oldest nation, for only its past extends into prehistory. Before the age of blasphemy, before the very existence of kings, was an apocalypse, and the war on highest perch. Built when dragons and Aesir ruled the land, the Immes have forgotten much of themselves, but pride covetously what little cultural memory remains of their ancient beginnings. Founded before the advent of kings, they have always known the rule of man, and so once written, all too eagerly adopted the edict of saints, consuming their kings and queens to the last, and returning to elder ways. Their commonwealth was founded in an unknown year by an unknown man, a cripple from the western slough, a giant born sickly and small, whom united the borderlands and backwaters, and taught man to combat monsters. Shrouded by the past, his name lost to time, he is simply remembered as the first clever man. Devising engines to kill at his behest, he crafted the first bear trap, so that even those as meek as he might rid the lands of beasts, and fabricated the crossbow, so legions could clear the skies of dragons. With wit alone he rid the slough of its greatest threats. Using the influence his innovations allotted him, he rallied his people to take the mountains. Driving the scions north, he signed into being the grand jury and its nation Immes. But as head of governance, he was forced to delegate, and so appointed judges to find the best of each community, choosing 1 in 50 men, those of literacy and highest renown, to be given the title of clevermen, and with it the right to vote on matters of justice. And though excluded from this fraternity, even women may earn these privileges, as Noita, through the mastery of lethal magics. Then as now the Immes boast of being their own masters. Their highest position, the Empyrean Judge, elected, not ordained. But with so much power handed to the masses, the Commonwealth is born of fractures, its foundational principles subject to politics, and vulnerable to the flaws of men. Presiding over their highest court, the Empyrean holds 2 votes, and a platform of profound respect. But despite their status, they are mortal, and selected by their own lowly peers. Failings evidenced even in their beloved founder, for his famed and fatal mistake. Once, when the first judge sat the throne, an old woman offered 9 texts for a great and terrible price, and the cleverman fell to his hubris. But as he laughed, the crone revealed herself to be a fallen star. Casting 6 books into the flame, she said, "Willst thou buy these 3 books for the price of 9? These books, once purchased, became the greatest artifacts of the Immes treasury, the Sibylline texts. Directly responsible for the country's miraculous survival, their words have predicted the future 1,000 times, and may do so 1,000 more. But one can only imagine what the world would be if they held all 9, had they a king instead of a judge. But to this way of life the Immes people cling with all their might, for twice has the chain of judges been broken, and twice has it been reforged. First during the covering of the cloth, and again mere days before Bernard's ascension. In Immes, the pontiff's wars were far more brutal and far longer fought, as they are the only vassal ever to cast off its banner. As a decade of honorable war stretched into endless siege, Almson sought to end the fighting, so poisoned their wells and stole the son of the Empyrean Judge. After 4 years of this, and unable to feed its armies, Immes surrendered, and Taken's son was later crowned first king of Immes. Efforts were made to rebuild, and bounty returned to the soil, but once born, the first prince rejected monarchy. From youth, Verdant, the would-be prince, led a revolution to take back their old ways, and not 2 weeks before the Brainard eclipse, he won. Verdant now reigns, but not through succession, and not as king. Ensuring the first king of Immes would too be its last, he beheaded his own father, before being elected by unanimous vote, Empyrean Judge return. War between pontiff and judge, Almson and Immes was inevitable, but with the crown resting on new head, Immes has been formally freed, and Verdant pardoned to rule with his people's decree. But the future of our nations remain uncertain, as Verdant holds fast to his hate of empire. Kopania is last and least of the stable territories, but holds this title not because of its lands, but in spite of them, with peace thriving under the threat of common enemies. Resting beneath the setting moon, Kopanian shores encircle her inflection point. Over seasons uncounted, the lunar presence has withered the land into shores of dust, severed from the rest of the world. A crumbling reef is surrounded by an angered sea, the archipelago dominated by the isles of jasper and jade. Since prehistory, its culture has been trapped, shaped by celestial forces beyond all control. With this inflection point so close, beasts and demons are invoked in great numbers, and seeds scarcely grow. Elsewhere, this predation and lack of agriculture would prohibit the formation of organized society. But unable to flee, the people here have learned to fight. Galvanized by hardship, elders emerged as an advisory caste, loyal only to survival. Each member of this centennial court is beyond the age of 100, but wise beyond their years. So trusted are their voices that they are heard even by the kings and queens of the Isles. Marshaled within every Kopanian kingdom, they are without country or allegiance, their order giving direction but never command. Always they caution peace among men, and are never to be slaughtered, even when nations move against each other. Since the Edict of Saints was written, their power and trust has only increased, as they help ensure no human succumbs to the temptation of power, cannibalizing their lords. But even beneath wise instruction, conditions here make for harsh lives and violent people. The lack of vegetation and constant threat from vicious animals has led Kopanians to form the Great Hunts. At once protecting and feeding their population, Kopanians devour predators as a way of life. Between fishing and these great hunts, their people are largely carnivorous. The constant physical stress and regular consumption of meat explaining their extraordinarily long lives, with notable individuals reaching ages in excess of 200 years. Here, monster hunting is represented in every cultural practice. Their clothes are made of leather, iron, and fur. They wear talismans of scrim-shod bone, and communities act as a pack of wolves. Every able-bodied person educated in sword, sorcery, and strategy. Even women are expected to fight, as here motherhood has no guarantee, for under the light of the barren moon the young suffer most, and 1 in 3 children are born still. Forced by the island, Kopanians focus on quality of their children rather than quantity, meaning that while they number only 5 million, they possess outstanding military might. But for all the curses the daughter moon has brought them, she has also blessed the islands with phenomenal mineral wealth. Precious metals, iron and lead, gold and moonstone here are found abundant and pure. Across the reef, the magics of exchange are greatly enhanced. The presence of magic and material has given all the opportunity to train with mind and blade, forming their history of warlocks, warlords, and alchemists. In recent times, these gifts have begun to make up for the island's shortcomings, as after their vassalization, trade between the fertile lands of Almson and Immes has allowed the import of plants and spices to feed an ever larger population. It is yet unknown how Kopania will respond to the new king, but with their rise in wealth and comfort, our countries are expected to remain closer than ever. Khrelma, translated from its native tongue, the Glass Desert, also known to the Methodist as the Anionian Interior. is a mirror to Kopania, for these are the lands of morning sun. It too has scarce vegetation, however not for want of soil, but a lack of gentle rains. Lethal heat pervades this place, and with a nearness to the sun comes a distance from the sea. Despite its long coastline, the storms and cool air of the north are perpetually blocked by the high walls of the Tolford mountain range. The troubles of drought caused by this rain shadow are only compounded by the treachery of shifting sands. Paths are obfuscated by mirage, and tracks left behind mysteriously vanish, while wanderers, especially those asleep, are swallowed by the dunes. Worst of these threats are the sandstorms. As lightning strikes, it gives the region its name, forming shards of glass carried on the wind, the air slashing at eyes and skin, whilst earth churns underfoot. Enduring these storms, even at a standstill, journeymen will find themselves magically miles off course, and without knowledge of navigation, travelers have no way of discerning the distance or direction such shifting sands can take them. It is no wonder then why so few cultures have learned to traverse its scorched and mystifying immensity, and why even fewer manage to live within. Two races call Khrelma home, the Areshi and Sairi, one bound to its wastes, and the other to its shores. The Areshi, both a race and a nation, dwell within the desert's interior in all its forms. Translating to those who march, Areshi born to the kingdom of their name are nomads, worshippers of the stars and land. Eschewing the coast, they are instead sailors of sand, walking by night and navigating by stars fixed in the sky as dunes roll beneath. Finding peace with the land, they emphasize joy in suffering, teaching that you will eventually get somewhere, if only you walk long enough. Their magi through these thoughts have made an ally of the desert, which aspires to entrap and deceive. They alone have learnt to bend sandstorms into gates, shortening their path and moving them across great distances. But their destination is so often their capital, the nexus of the desert, where all things are eventually brought. Named Eresh Kegal, it means to cease one's march. It is at once hidden and welcoming, but many Ereshi settle along different paths, finding the more hospitable places and making life there. The Sairi, unlike these people, stay always in one place. Building along the coast, they combat the desert with great works of architecture. Together they boast a grand merchant fleet, constructing mighty vessels and vast harbors. But all such works are put to shame by the engineering of Paleo-Nuba. Built upon the inflection point of the sea, what was once a small oasis has been made into fields of grapes and wheat. Focused on works of infrastructure, they have made a pourable stone they call concrete, and over centuries have constructed the generation. Damming the oasis, they control their inflection point, extending the shoreline inland by use of aqueducts, and reclaiming the desert through shaded towers. The nation is built upon 5 tiers of flowing water, channeling surplus into its surroundings, producing lush farmlands which leap from the sands amidst a web of irrigation complexes, transforming the region into the Green Crescent. Khrelma was the first foreign territory to be conquered by Almsonian rule in 487, with their capture predating the industrialized warfare which later defined the Great Dawn. They suffered the least of our empire's cruelties, and after 18 years of fighting, victory came in part not from bloodshed, but the adoption of the Solarian faith in these sun-bleached lands. In the 70 years since past, once disparate kingdoms are now united, as Areshi and Sairi connect land and sea. Their new prosperity exemplified in the nation of Renaissal and the renowned Piranesi family, traitors known the world over for their wealth, commerce, and magics of conjuration and acceleration. A family friend to the Almsons, and grateful now free. Duskfall is the name we give the far north, a place of maddening vastness and profound cold, where the stars and moon stride and sun is far astray. Its frost, fatal to crops and men alike, is sadly the least of these lands' worst fates. As what has truly prevented a great Duskfellan civilization is a single being, but no less a force of nature. In the age benevolent, Duskfall was upon the front line of the war on Highest Perch, where the unstoppable dragons clashed against the immortal Aesir. Unmatched in skill, Aesir could be bested, but turning to tears as they fell, they slept, and awoke once their water returned to sea. Despite knowing no end, the two races proved to be peers far too equal for victory. To cease eternal conflict and save mankind, despair deceived the two parties. At a peace summit, he fed the dragons meat, which feasted on their minds and reduced them to animals. And to the Aesir he served a wine, with seeds which drank their water, sealing immortal form in immovable oak. But one Aesir, Ilnihasnik, wisest by far, saw through the Overlord's trick. Knowing this, despair found her, and before she could warn her sisters, despair forced a meal meant for dragons down her throat. Her deep mind withered all the same. Reduced to a creature of hunger, Ilnihasnik stalks each Duskfellan night, cloaking the land in a blizzard for miles around. Carried on northerly winds, she travels in an instant, hunting our inner flame by our breath seen in air. Over centuries of existence, Ilnihasnik has slaughtered thousands, and herself been slain nearly 100 times. But refusing to drink the nectared wine, she rises inexorably from the mortal sea, days after each defeat. Kept at bay only by the scars in her mind, she fears the lights of fire and moon, and dares not walk under the sun. Each night the hamlets of Duskfall must erect bonfires at their center to ward off this beast. This is why Duskfall has always known clans, and never true kingdoms. As cities grow, they must consider the costs. Pockets of dark are left vulnerable, and firewood cannot always be found. To protect sprawling settlements, towers along their borders must be set alight to keep Ilnihasnik at bay, and pyromancers employed in the lands where the sun's will is weakest. Harder still, few travelers chance to move at night. The bravest may venture under the clearest of skies and brightest of moons, but slowed by weather, torchwood, and the phase of moon, reliable trade and communication are all but impossible. Sadly, it took the light of our Pontiff and Praetor to unite Duskfall, as it was here that our greatest shame took place. A genocide of burned men. To push back the night, pyres of flesh were burned. Their light, red as blood, seared into the Aesir's forsaken mind, and drove her back to sea. With Almsonian rule gone, these practices are put to rest. But as these fires wane, Ilnihasnik will return, and I fear the tribes of Duskfall will tear asunder as our nation pulls from the north. The eastern coastal region borders the Almsonian Empire, and yet was the only territory which the pontiff never came to rule. Extending all the way to the misty sea, the closer one draws to the ocean, the more its reigns grow in strength. Venturing east, sun and moon set beneath the land and sea, and the dense thicket of the forest fence gives way to the impregnable jungle known as the White Wood. Sheltered by perpetual clouds overhead, nowhere else are celestials so abjured. And drinking deep from constant showers, here trees tower as if it were the age begun. Vines and leaves tangle and twine together, and the canopy extends such that no light can touch the ground. Thus the forest floor has been plunged into a black midnight, which since the trees first sprouted has known no following day. Burgeoning from every wound, scars upon the land quickly fade as flora clambers to fill cleared space. At the base of these trees, it can scarcely be told whether you walk on the ground or in caverns miles beneath. Things that persist within this arboreal abyss become shades, flowers and lumber alike shedding their pigment to a pallid white. Even the colors of fire struggle to bring light in these depths, extinguished by rains and unable to gain purchase within living wood. This albinism extends to the goblins of these lands. Adopting the tone of life, these goblin whites are far larger, stronger, and more numerous than anywhere else. Made for this environment, they slaughter freely those crippled by a lack of sight, for they are born blind, and see with sound and touch and scent. The caves and crevasses carved by torrential water are perfect for their traps and dwellings, and in the rainforest they fear no fire, and are healed by the richness of the soil. But while goblins the world over crave flesh and blood, there is more to fear in these rainforests. For without the need to defend themselves from the sun, all flora have been freed to explore violence. Each stem in competition to return you to the earth and lay your corpse at its roots. Thorns are as razors, fruits are poison, and flowers sting with deadly acids. In this race, life has grown parasitic, pushing onwards and upwards. Layers of vines strangle the bark, and a veneer of lichen covers them in turn. But one thing cooperates. One thing dominates, for these are not the white woods, but the white wood, and the massive trees of the Far East are in fact one. A single colonal organism, a colony connected through colossal roots, spreading out underground and sprouting 1,000,000 times. So large and great, they endure all hardships, and shelter and support the entire ecosystem which they shade. Acting as eyes where nothing can be seen, the trees speak with goblins and feed them information. The hopeful imagine monsters afraid of this place, but it is an affront, and with so much to devour, beasts strong enough to survive here eat their fill, and grow among the deadliest creatures to stalk the land. But these are the lands of plenty, and even in the darkest dungeon, man will make a place to call home. Most of its 10 million inhabitants live along the forest fence, the dark pines bordering Almson, trading lumber for metal, but a brave or foolish few run east, hiding beneath clouds and canopy. In fact, since the edict was written, the population of the ECR has risen dramatically, as kings and queens, paranoid or wise, seek shelter within this deadly grove, preferring to contend with nature rather than the mouths of human saints. While few endure the true wilderness, many kingdoms that venture into the heart of the White Wood do so above the tree line, where air is thin and land is furthest. Here the dense vegetation abates, as mountaintops act like islands, rising out of a green sea. The inhabitants of such places must dive below the tree line to forage and hunt, but at least they have a place to retreat, to build and live without fear of overgrowth, free from the jungle's predators and parasites. The vitality of these lands even conspire to deprive man from the means to defend themselves. So far from the moon, there are scarcely any metals in the earth, and without the sun, no flames to forge them. With such limited tools and technology, scarcity breeds significance, leading to the practice of family swords. With so much importance placed upon the materials themselves, the items they craft must earn their right to exist. Influential families pouring large portions of their wealth and resources into single blades, making it difficult to find more potent enchantments or superior craftsmanship anywhere else. Shaping the structure of the societies that make them, these swords are held by the young men whom can best use them, meaning leaders here rise to prominence far earlier than those in other cultures. Equipped with scarce but superior weapons and knowledge of the terrain, this is how native peoples were able to resist the Great Dawn. With a strike and fade, they leveraged the peril of the White Wood against our armies, turning the forest fence into an impassable wall. This is the world as it lies today. Within these 6 regions are nations and kingdoms uncounted, all whose cultures have been changed by the Empire. And while their accounts will be written, this volume aims only to encapsulate the broad strokes, and use them as a backdrop for the imminent changes to come with Bernard's new reign, as many current realms may be recorded merely in the history of grand and nascent powers. For some rulers and states, stable for decades, will fade without our supporting force.